Hi, welcome to UT Southwestern Medical Center. My name is Lori, and thank you for joining us for our Facebook Live event today. We're going to be talking about managing depression during the holiday season, which is upon us, and we're talking with Dr. Jennifer Hughes. Thanks for joining us. Dr. Hughes is a clinical psychologist and assistant professor of psychiatry here at UT Southwestern. She leads the Risk and Resilience Network in the Center for Depression Research and Clinical Care, a cornerstone of the O'Donnell Brain Institute. Before we start, we'd like to thank our partners at the National Alliance on Mental Illness in Dallas, and we'd also like to thank the Center for Depression Research and Clinical Care for helping us to promote this event. So thanks for joining us, and let's just go ahead and start with a question that's probably pretty common, which is, a lot of us feel sad from one time or another. How do we know when that sadness is actually developing into depression?
Yeah, this is a pretty common question. So sadness and depression are definitely related. But everybody feels sad sometimes, right? That's a normal emotion, often experienced in response to loss or maybe to stress that's going on in your life. But depression is something a bit different. So depression is actually a medical illness, and that is when, I almost think of it as like sadness plus. Oftentimes someone will experience sadness or irritability. They might lose interest in the things they used to enjoy. So let's say you're somebody who always likes to go running, or you really like to bake, and then you find that it's just not the same anymore. It's not really giving you that same kind of thrill that it used to give you, and so you kind of start to avoid it or withdraw from doing those things. And then there's some physical symptoms that usually go along with clinical depression. So people will notice appetite changes. For some people, they eat more, and for some, they eat less. Sleep changes. For some people, they sleep more. For other people, they find that they're sleeping a lot less. And then there's other sort of associated symptoms that you'll see, things like more fatigue, feeling less motivated, maybe having trouble concentrating. For some people, they'll have really negative thoughts, either about themselves or maybe feeling more hopeless about the future. And then for some people, you'll even see thinking about death or suicide as one of the symptoms of depression. It's when those kinds of symptoms are all happening at the same time and it lasts for at least 2 weeks that you might have clinical depression. And that's when you want to go talk to your primary care doctor about how to get some help and what your options are. Yes, and there's a lot of treatment options out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here we are in the holiday season. So is it common during this time of year for you to hear more about people feeling depressed?
Yeah. I think, I was looking at the research before this to kind of make sure I hadn't missed anything recently. And there really is no actual evidence that depression is more common during the holidays. But I think people talk about noticing it more because they're experiencing a bit more sadness. And in contrast, during the holidays, we see more people being joyful. Everybody wants to be kind of merry and, sort of having this magical holiday season. And so then if you're somebody that's maybe not experiencing that, or you are experiencing some sadness, you notice it more, it feels more marked because it's different from how everybody else seems to be.
That makes sense. There's this peer pressure out there that everything looks happy and joyful.
Yes, everything's lit with twinkle lights and stuff this time of year. Yeah, and if you're not feeling that inside, then you may be more prone to kind of get stuck in that sadness or to really focus on it. I do hear a lot about holiday stress this time of year, though. That's a term that people will talk about.
Well, that's a great segue, because I do think that some of our listeners would want to talk about stress as well.
Yeah.
Do you have any good tips for what can we do about that? How can we sort of lessen our stress level?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons to feel more stressed at the holidays, right? I think there's a lot of external pressure on you during this time of year. I think APA, the American Psychological Association, did a study a few years back where they really asked people about their holiday stress, and people talked about how work felt more stressful this time of year because you still have the same amount of work to do, but you have a lot of parties and you have a lot of really fun events that you're doing, but kind of takes away from your usual time in the office that you would spend. You have to run to your kids' Christmas recital, all those kinds of things, which are fun, but the demands don't stop at work. And then there's the demands of just preparing for the holidays, and in particular, women in that study commented on feeling more stress related to those things like planning the parties, taking care of gifts, making sure you have a gift for the teacher, all those kinds of things that come up. And so definitely we know people are more prone to notice stress around the holidays. So a couple quick tips that I think I can speak to.
We'd love to hear that.
I think one, this is a time of year that it's extra important to practice self-care. So whatever that means for you. If you're somebody that likes to get massages, if you're somebody that needs to go for a run, or that needs to just stop and listen to some music that you enjoy every once in a while, this is really the time of year to do that. And make sure while you're doing that, you throw yourself 100% into that activity. So you want to be very, what we call, mindful about that activity. Yeah. And maybe even treat yourself a little bit. You're treating everybody else during the holidays, so find something that you like. And
I like this idea.
Give yourself a little tiny something too, without guilt, because that's part of you taking care of yourself as well.
Right.
Another thing that can be helpful in the holidays is to really volunteer, especially if you're somebody that maybe the holidays reminds you of losing somebody that you cared about, and it can bring up sadness for people. And we found over and over again in the positive psychology research that practicing gratitude and kind of getting outside of yourself can really enhance your mood. And so giving back can be something that can feel great. And that can be done, as you guys know, with just volunteering your time if you're not somebody that has money to volunteer, or volunteering money, just kind of depending, picking an angel off a Christmas tree, or going to a shelter, or, offering to donate your time in that way can be really helpful.
Those are wonderful ideas. I see we're starting to get quite a few questions in from our audience.
Wonderful.
So that's great. Thank you for sending these.
Yeah.
So we have a question from Melissa who wants to know, what are some natural ways to treat depression that are most effective?
So I would say one thing that we know really helps with depression is exercise. And that's kind of one of the most natural things out there. A lot of studies have found that exercise can be a great augmentation to some other treatments for clinical depression. The most effective treatments for depression at this point really involve medication or psychotherapy, and in particular kind of therapy called cognitive behavior therapy. Is one of the ones that has a lot of evidence of being helpful. So I always recommend, if you think you have clinical depression, go ahead and talk to your doctor about it, to talk about the array of options that are possible for treatment. But if there's something that you're noticing your mood's just down a bit and you're wanting to try to manage it a bit better, exercise can be one great way to get started.
Okay, well that sounds like that could serve multiple purposes too.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, healthy in more than one way.
Yeah.
So we've got another question. Let's see. Caroline wants to know, how does this issue impact students who are facing final exams at this time of year? Great question.
That is a great question. So one of my roles as the head of the Risk and Resilience Network here at our Center for Depression Research and Clinical Care, we spend time in schools. We actually do resilience building and mental health promotion programs in the schools right now. And so we actually just had a round of our facilitators out in the schools working with teenagers. They do definitely feel the impact of final exams this time of year. And I think teens will report that the actual holiday season when they're out of school is fantastic for them. But it's that build up in early December when they're also balancing the demands of school with the demands of holiday parties and sort of family responsibilities that come up. So stress management tips for kids in the, worrying about final exams would be really setting up a good study plan, not putting things off until last minute. And then the self-care tips we talked about earlier. So just making sure that you take a little time every day to do something that's going to maybe bring your anxiety or your stress level down a bit. So exercise, good music, time with friends, taking a break from studying when needed, and then getting yourself back to it, not putting that off till last minute.
And those sound like enjoyable things.
Yeah.
So taking some time to enjoy yourself.
Exactly. To take care of yourself.
Everything.
Yes.
Okay, so some more questions coming in. One from Crystal. She wants to know, how do you know if you have major depressive disorder, or are you just feeling sad around the holidays?
Yeah. So major depressive disorder is going to be a sort of grouping of symptoms that somebody experiences for at least 2 weeks. And it's going to be a really marked change in your mood. And again, it's not just sadness, but usually includes a loss of interest in things you enjoyed, some kind of sleep or appetite symptom, impacts on your energy, your concentration, your motivation. So it's more than sort of just sadness. It includes some associated symptoms.
That sounds like something to speak with your doctor about.
Definitely. Yeah, start with your primary care doctor, and then if you end up needing specialty care, like a psychiatrist or psychologist or a mental health provider, your primary care doctor can help you find that.
Okay, thanks. That's really helpful. And then we have a question here it is, from Anupa. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And she would like to know, how can I support a family member, especially if it's a child, who's going through depression in the holiday season?
Yeah, that's a really good question. If you know somebody in your family is depressed and it's the holidays, there's a couple things you might want to do to support them. One, just check in on how they're doing. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just listen to somebody. Next would be to remember that they have depression, which you heard the things I just named that are associated with that, like fatigue, being a little bit more tired, maybe not sleeping as well. So just keeping that in mind as you're sort of planning out the family parties, the family holiday schedule. The person with depression might need a little bit of time to kind of to rest, to rebound a little bit. It's still recommended that people with depression get out there and do activities. We know that even though when you don't feel like it, getting out and actually doing something that's called behavioral activation can actually really help your mood.
Okay.
So if you're depressed or if you're worried about your child who's depressed, you don't want to totally not do anything. You don't want to encourage them to just stay in bed for the holidays. But you also want to be thoughtful. I probably wouldn't overschedule a ton of parties and family activities. Remember that they're balancing kind of those symptoms with trying to enjoy the holiday.
Sure. So they're dealing with a lot at the same time.
Exactly. You've got it.
Well, this is going really well. We've got a lot of great questions, and we have, I think, about 15 more minutes, so keep those questions coming.
Wonderful.
And we have a few more that we got prior to the chat. One thing was about a different kind of depression, seasonal affective disorder.
Mm-hmm.
So what exactly is seasonal affective disorder, and what can be done about it?
Yeah, so seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, is definitely more common during this time of year, but you typically see it in places that really have those very dark winters. So places that don't get a lot of sunlight, I think Seattle is a classic example of this, right? Places where it's kind of dreary a lot. It has to do with not getting enough sunlight, not getting enough exposure to vitamin D. And there's some separate treatments for that involve really increasing your exposure to that. And so, again, talk to your primary care doctor if you're worried about having seasonal affect disorder. That is the one kind of depression that typically is more common during this time of year, at least in this hemisphere.
Okay. And here's another question from a friend out there who would like to know, is there anything I can be doing at home to help myself feel less depressed during the holidays?
Yeah, so I think in addition to self-care that we talked about earlier, and perhaps thinking about volunteering or getting yourself outside of the home a little bit, I think just some of the things you think about when you're home can actually impact your mood.
Okay.
So one, I would say work to have realistic expectations about the holidays. I think we tend to put a lot of pressure on ourselves this time of year to have the perfect event, to find the perfect present. And when you really think about your life, probably the holidays where something went wrong are the things you remember the most, right? Like when mom burned the
laugh
turkey.
about them, yeah.
Yes, yeah. And the year you had to go get takeout because mom burned something, or that. Those kinds of stories typically turn into something that are actually a really good memory. So I think just setting realistic expectations. I think if you're a parent, also thinking about how to set realistic expectations for your kids this time of year.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes a lot of the focus does move to being about gifts, and so really trying as a family to be realistic about what you can afford, and talking about that ahead of time can be helpful. The other thing I think you can do if you're at home that involves kind of thinking that might help your mood over the holidays is practicing gratitude. I think this is a time of year to really think about, for you, what does the holiday mean? For some people, it's about family. For some people, it's about religion. For some people, it's just about anticipation of the new year. And so taking time to reflect on that. One gratitude practice that I often do with the families that I work with is called thanks notes. So you take just a simple pack of Post-it notes, and everybody in the family writes one thing they're thankful about and for another family member once a day. And you can leave the note somewhere in the house where they have to find it. You can do it at the kitchen table. You can find what works for your family. But just that simple practice of noticing something you're grateful for about a family member or thankful about one time a day can really change the way the family feels and the way you feel having taken that time to reflect.
Sure, it sounds really positive and affirming, and maybe even helps your relationship a bit. I would think
that is a great side effect of this intervention too. Yeah.
Sounds very nice. Well, we have another question that's just come in, which is, if you are concerned about a friend or family member showing signs of depression over the holidays, how should you approach them and talk to them about that?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Yeah. So we've spent some time this afternoon talking about some of the signs or symptoms that you might notice in somebody. I think the best thing to do is just ask, say, I've noticed that you seemed a little down, or I've noticed that you seem not your usual self. Whatever phrasing kind of works for what you're observing. And then listen. Is there anything I can do to support you right now? Is there anything I can do to help you? It might be that they're just having a rough day, and that's when you caught them, and just being able to talk to you about it helps. Or it might be that they were waiting for somebody to notice that things were not going so well. And then once you've listened, see if you can help get them some more support. So if the two of you determine together that they seem maybe to be depressed, that's when you could say, hey, maybe your primary care doctor could help you out, or maybe there's somebody else we could go talk to that can help us figure out who we should talk to next.
Sure.
Let me also say here too, I wanted to make sure everybody that's listening was aware, if you are interested in getting involved in more depression research, that's something we do here at the UT Southwestern.
Oh, that's interesting.
Center for Depression Research and Clinical Care. Yeah, we have a lot of different studies and programs. So if you're somebody listening and you have either had depression, or you currently have depression, or you know somebody with depression who might want to be involved in the research, they can call our helpline. So that is 214-648-HELP.
That's a simple number to remember.
214-648-HELP.
Right. And is that confidential if I sign up for something?
Yeah, so it's confidential. All of that will be explained when you call. But that first phone call is simply just to tell you about the opportunities we have and to see if there's anything that might be a good fit for you.
That sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
Can you tell us anything about what might be up and coming in this field? It sounds like you're interested in the research side of it as well.
Yeah, so most of my research here is really looking at ways we can prevent depression. So we focus here at the center a lot on treatment, especially treating depression out in the real world. So how to help support primary care treatment, and also how to treat depression that's a little more complicated, like treatment-resistant depression. But the Risk and Resilience Network that I work with is really focused on how do we build resilience in teenagers and kids and families, so that hopefully we can prevent depression from ever starting, or at least teach people the signs so we can catch it sooner, and hopefully prevent people from going through years of suffering from depression without being able to get help.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
Here's a question that I think some of us have been wondering about. Is depression, is that something that can run in the family? Is it genetic?
Yeah. So definitely there is a genetic component to depression. Oftentimes we will see depression and anxiety will sort of run in the family tree. Now, if your parent is depressed, you're not 100% guaranteed to have depression. Okay. But we will see that it's common for that to happen in families.
Okay. Well, here we have a question from Corey, who's asking, what are some ways to build resilience during this time of year?
Yeah, so I think there's lots of different pieces to resilience. I would say the one I'd focus on the most would be resilience related to looking at the way you're thinking about things. So we talked about gratitude, we talked about expectations. I think this is where resilience is really built by something kind of negative happening or something really hard happening, and then it's how you kind of work through that and then come out on the other side of it, right?
Right.
So there's actually a really interesting study that shows that people that have very, very little stress in their life and people that have a ton of stress in their life report feeling pretty upset, pretty unhappy, report having a low quality of life. But people that have a medium amount of stress in their life report kind of the highest satisfaction in life. And so I think that's really important.
Interesting.
Yeah, it kind of means there's something there about having some challenges, having some obstacles that maybe helps us build up some life satisfaction. Maybe that relates to resilience somehow. Sure. So I think the skill I would say is just noticing when you're encountering an obstacle, doing whatever you can to get through it, getting support when you need to get through it, and then taking a look back and reflecting on that experience and maybe what you took from it, what you learned from it, what opportunity you had as part of that challenge that maybe made you come out stronger, or feeling like you can do something new in your world, which is really a good thing.
Right. So it sounds to me like you can turn it around into a growth experience, or at least in your way of thinking about it.
Yeah, there's a term for that. We talk about growth mindset, which is sort of having that mindset towards growth and really looking at challenges, and even failures as an opportunity for growth. I think the word failure is so tricky. I think people don't like to fail. We don't like to talk about our failures.
We don't want to be one
exactly.
as a label.
Yes, but failure is actually a really important part of growth. And I love this story. I found online this wonderful clip. The founder of the company Spanx talked about how her father at the dinner table every night would actually ask them to share the best part of their day and then the time that they failed that day. And if they didn't have a failure story, he would say, man, it just feels like you're not trying new things enough. Because failure is so important, right? So turning that around to where a failure is not a negative thing, but a failure is a success, or is showing that you tried something new or different. I thought that was really a great story. And so it's something I've definitely tried to do more at home too.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing that with us. We do have just a few more minutes for questions, so if you're out there and you're thinking, I really want to ask a question, this is a good time to send it in. So we have just a few more minutes. Here's one from Kristen about relaxation. I'm so glad this came up because everybody likes relaxation. What relaxation techniques do you recommend for people dealing with depression?
Yeah, these I would recommend for anybody, not just people dealing with depression. I think there's a wonderful app that you can download and try. I use it myself. It's called the Calm app, CALM. It's just great. It's for free, and it has different kind of scenes, and it'll walk you through different relaxation strategies. So it will take you through like a mindfulness practice where you breathe or you focus on your breath. It has really nice visuals and sounds. So that's one good option for something you can do anywhere if you have it on your phone. Another relaxation strategy that's really helpful is just really kind of imagining each part of your body tensing and relaxing. We call it progressive muscle relaxation. If you want to look for a way to do that, there's a lot of websites about it, but again, it's progressive muscle relaxation, and it's a technique to really go through your body and practice sort of systematically relaxing it. And that can help a lot of people with overall relaxation.
Sure, that's a great suggestion. And I'm really glad that you brought up the app.
Yeah.
Because that kind of thing sort of is a big part of our lives. And we do have one more question before we finish up today.
Okay.
And it's a really good one. It's about how does social media and screen time relate to depression, especially during the holidays?
Yeah, so this is a great question. I think it's one that we need to do more research about. And I will tell you, social media and things are so new that we don't have a ton of data at this point about how it impacts. And the data we have is a little complicated, but I can say just kind of clinically with teenagers that I work with, social media can be a really great source of strength and support. It's a way that you communicate with your friends, especially when you're out of school and not seeing each other as much. It can be a really important way to interact. But I think just like anything, too much of it is probably not a good idea. So trying to moderate your use of these things, especially if you're somebody who's prone to depression. We know when someone's depressed, their thinking gets a little bit more negative, and they're more prone to notice negative things. So when you're scrolling through your feed, if you're someone with depression, you're more likely to pick out the things that are not going so well, or to see someone's life going really well and compare yours to it and feel like it's not.
Yeah.
You've done, right? We've all done that.
Yeah.
The social comparison. So I think, really just noticing the impact of social media on your personal mood. And if you're having a day that you're not doing so well and looking at that is not helping, stay away from it. If you have a day that you're not doing so well and looking at that feels good, then do it for a little bit. But again, practicing that in moderation.
Okay.
Really important.
So it depends on your mood, and perhaps it depends on what you're looking at as well.
Yes, very true.
Your choice.
Very true.
Okay. Well, do you have anything else that you'd like us to know before we finish up today? Just before let's see, we've got how many days left?
I know, just a few more days left.
4 or 5 days.
Take a deep breath. So I think one other resource that would be great to mention here, the American Psychological Association, or APA, has a holiday stress resource center on their website that has a lot of helpful tips with just recognizing that you're feeling stress over the holiday, and then some other things that you can try. So you might want to look that up if you're somebody that's feeling particularly stressed, in addition to trying the things we talked about today.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. So it sounds like we've got our to-do list for how to handle that to-do list.
You got it.
More or less.
You got it. Just don't let this to-do add more stress to your life.
Exactly.
All right.
Well, thank you very much for being here with us. And I think we want to wish everybody a happy holiday, whatever holiday you're celebrating, and have a great week. Thank you.
Thank you.